it going, everyone? Since I uploaded my video officially saying that I was selling my Turbo X, which by the way, I'm recording this video about 2 days after I listed it for sale, and it still hasn't sold, so this video is not going to go up anytime soon. If you missed that particular video discussing the car being for sale and my asking price and all that, click up here in the top corner. But as soon as I mentioned I was selling it, everyone started asking me, what are you getting next? What are you getting next? So I explained briefly in the for sale video kind of some characteristics I was looking at for certain cars. So I figured today I would kind of list out the half dozen or so cars I've test driven. This is going to be in no particular order, and you guys can kind of gauge from the types of cars I'm looking at. You can make your guess on which one you think I'm going to get. One of these cars is the car I'm 99% chance going to get. I do want to say though, a lot of you think I might be getting a new gen Saab 9.5 or a newer Saab. I'm just going to say no right here. While I'd love to get a new gen 9.5, the purpose of me getting a newer car is not necessarily a car that is 2 years newer than my 9.3 and doesn't really have any big advantages over my 9.3. So I actually have 7 cars on my list here from notes that I've just test driven. I'm going to go over kind of my basic thoughts on each car. You guys can, provide your opinions down below in the comments, but like I said, I pretty much have already made up my mind. So in no particular order, the first car that I kind of looked at here was the Kia Stinger and the Genesis G70. So these cars are pretty much the same thing. Now, I didn't drive a Genesis G70, but I did test drive a Kia Stinger. Now, the specs of some of these cars are kind of bad. Like this Kia Stinger was gray with carbon red stripes, which was not for me. But because I wasn't looking at buying the car right the day when I went to test drive it, I just wanted to experience what it was like. So these cars come with a twin turbo V6. I'll put the power output of them down here on the screen. I should also mention that all these cars I'm looking at are not new cars. They're all cars that are probably in the 3 to 7-year-old range. Cars that are either like return on leases, or they all have, they're still relatively new, but they're not brand new. So like I said, I didn't drive the G70, which is just really a smaller and a little bit more luxurious version of the Stinger. It did have really good pickup on it with that twin turbo V6, and the brakes, it has Brembo brakes. I thought those were absolutely amazing. One thing I was concerned with the Kia was the shifter in the photos looked very cheap and like something that you'd find in like a 15-year-old Kia, It didn't feel as cheap as I thought it would when I drove it, but it still was probably my biggest thing I hated about the car. Another big downside of it I noticed though was that the transmission seemed to shift a little bit slower than some of these other cars I had looked at. All the cars I'm looking at are pretty much automatic because it is going to be a daily. I would like something that's an automatic. It did obviously shift faster than my Arc, which is currently parked outside, but that's also an 18, 20-year-old car now, so of course it should be faster and better than that. Next up, and this is probably the most logical replacement for my Turbo X, and something that I'd say at least a half dozen Saab guys I can think of off the top of my head kind of graduated to after selling their Saab, and that is an Alfa Romeo Giulia. So these came with a 4-cylinder turbo, either rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, and the Alfa is, quite frankly, probably the most beautiful new sedan out there for sale. Now the issue with them is, and the issue, I went to a particular dealership here in Phoenix. They had about 6 or 7 of them, and every single one of them was dealer buybacks, meaning that they were pretty much lemons, so the dealership bought them back. This particular one I'm showing on the screen right here only had 7,000 miles on it, but they had 4 pages of maintenance repairs, meaning some of the things that were repaired were the whole turbo was replaced, they had an injector go bad, the radiator was replaced, and for whatever reason the steering wheel was replaced like 3 times as well. My other big gripe and concern with the Giulia, this isn't really a concern, more of a gripe, is the gearing. So this one also has an 8-speed auto, which felt similar shift time wise and everything to the Stinger, but the gears were just so short. I mean, it's a relatively quick car, don't get me wrong, it makes like 200 something horsepower. But you just go through the gears so fast. I'm doing a pull, and by the time I'm at the end of second gear, I'm only doing like 43, 45 miles an hour, and I'm shifting in the third. So it's like constant shifting. And while that kind of gives you the idea of you going fast, to me, it's kind of, I didn't really like that. Now, the other thing with the Giulia is it handled way better than anything else on this list. I mean, that is truly a driver's car. It's beautiful interior, beautiful exterior, it's very high quality. It's just the reliability would be a big concern with that one. Next up is the Audi S3. This actually wasn't a car that I was initially considering. My roommate works at a dealership in Scottsdale, and he's like, hey, we have an S3 that's kind of like what you're looking at. So I went and drove that, absolutely fell in love with it. I thought it was a spectacular car. For only being a 4-cylinder, I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, I mean, I kind of already have a 4-cylinder, you know, it's newer, it's sportier, it makes just under 300 horsepower. I'm like, it's probably not going to feel that fast, but it had a dual clutch 6-speed transmission, so it shifted probably quicker and better than anything else here, which I really did like. Being an Audi, it did have pretty high quality interior and everything. It was a little bit older, so it didn't have things like Apple CarPlay in it, so that was a downside. But for the price point I'm looking at, this is kind of the year range I would have to look at for an S3 is like the mid 2010s, like 2015, 16, maybe a 17. I know in 2018 Audi added the virtual cockpit, but I think that might be a little bit out of my price range. The Audi is also, I think, one of the better looking cars on this list. It's very modern looking, and it's just slightly aggressive, subtly aggressive, kind of like the Turbo X's, which I really like that as well. And it also comes with Audi's Quattro all-wheel drive, which I believe is a hall-deck system similar to what's in the Turbo X. Next up is the BMW 340i/440i. I test drove one of these at a Chrysler dealership. They had one as a trade-in at their dealership in Tempe. It had some kind of ghetto-looking modifications, like a gross-looking carbon wing, some big fake red paddle shifters. I didn't drive this one long, and quite frankly, I just didn't really fall in love with it. And that's not because of the modifications, because obviously I can find without the modifications. But to me, the 340i or the 440i, it just, something about it, it just wasn't really for me. Next, I test drove a Volkswagen Golf R. Now the Golf R and the S3 are basically the same exact car. The Golf R is just obviously a hatchback from Volkswagen. It's a little bit lighter, but it's kind of more of a driver focused car, I guess you could say. It doesn't come with all the luxuries, all the nice trim and everything that you would find in the Audi. Oddly enough though, I actually drove an S3 and a Golf R back to back within about 15-30 minutes of each other, and the Golf R seemed to shift a little bit slower. It might have been just a tiny little hair faster than the S3, but overall, you know, that they're very similar cars expectedly. Next was the S60, the Volvo S60, and I'm sure a lot of you would either hope I'd get something like this or would at least hope that I mention it in this video. So I've always loved the Volvo S60. I think it's one of the prettiest cars out there for sale right now. This one I think was a 2020 T5. They just happened to have it on their lot at a dealership in Scottsdale that I drove it at. And I'm like, well, I guess I might as well try it out. And compared to literally everything else on this list, quality-wise, it blew it out of the water. I mean, the materials that Volvo uses, their screen, the seats, everything is just so nice, so luxurious in that interior, and I absolutely, hands down, loved that about it. The downside was the driving experience. Now, a lot of you might say, why don't you get a Polestar? And the thing is, I don't have $60,000 or $70,000 laying around to afford a new Polestar. So Polestar is out of the question, but this car really just disappointed me driving experience wise. It didn't feel fast. In fact, it felt slower than my 2.0 9.3. It felt slower than 9.5s I've driven, and that might not be true at all, you know, but while it was a very refined and comfortable driving experience, it was not sporty at all, which is to be expected. It's just a normal Volvo S60. It's not a super sporty model like the Polestar or the S3 was. You know, it's a more kind of relaxed driving experience. And that's not to knock it, that's just what the car is, like I said. But for me, I'm not sure how I felt about that. It just felt pretty mundane and very toned down to drive. Now, last on this list is the Tesla Model 3. If I'm being 100% honest with you guys, there's a very low chance I would actually get a Model 3, mostly because everyone and their sister has a Model 3. It's one of the most popular new cars here in America. I'm sure you Europeans watching, it's very popular over there as well. And driving an electric car, you know, I expected it, all the crazy reactions people have of Tesla, you know, launching and things. So any performance Tesla, like a Model 3 Performance, would be a little bit out of my price range. So I couldn't afford something like that. So what I did test drive though was a long range Model 3. And if I'm gonna be 100% honest with you guys, it really just disappointed me. It was very slow. I did a lookup afterwards. I'm like, oh, 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds, which in theory I believe was faster than everything else on this list. And you'd step on it and it didn't really like throw you back in your seat like you would expect. It handled great around turns. The salesman that was with me when I was driving around was like, send it around this turn, you know, as fast as you can, see how well it handles, really get on it, you know. And while Tesla has great tech, I also don't know how I feel about not having any sort of screen or gauge cluster right in front of the steering wheel. It's extremely minimalist, which some people like. But again, an electric car from a fun to drive perspective, not being able to hear an exhaust note or anything like that, I don't know how I feel about that. The quality of it was decent. It wasn't great. That's to be expected from Tesla. They're not really known for quality. There you have it, guys. Those are the 7 or so cars that I have test driven so far. There might be 1 or 2 more that I'll test drive, but you can see all these cars sort of fit into a particular niche or category of cars. But it's definitely going to be something fun, something sporty, something that's going to be great for content, and something that I'm going to love driving on a daily basis. So again, let me know down below your thoughts on any of these cars, if you've had any personal experiences with them and what you think. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say down below in the comments. I know a lot of you will be disappointed that it won't be another Saab, but please, again, remember, I will always have my 2.093. I'm not selling that car anytime soon. I have 0 plans to sell that. In fact, I just put more money into it a couple weeks ago. But yeah, so the Saab content definitely won't end, and when this car does actually sell, I want to wait to find the right car, you know? So I might not buy that replacement. The Turbo X could have already sold by the time this video is up, and I probably still wouldn't have a replacement. So it might take a little bit of time, but it's going to be worth the wait in the end, similar to how it was when I first bought this car. I wanted to wait for the right Turbo X. But I'm ranting at this point, so I'll definitely keep you guys updated on whether the Turbo X is sold or, you know, when I do get a new car. But my plan is pretty much to take the money from selling this car plus a little bit more cash and use it as a down payment and finance probably a little bit less than half or maybe half of this new car. So thank you all so much for watching once again. I'll see you all next time.